Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, podcast where two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journeys and how they navigate mental health while working in the field. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I have a therapist from down under. We're going international again. I'm super stoked to be joined today by Jane Kennedy. Jane, thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
I always start with the same question, but I might switch it. No, I'll start with the same question.
Yeah.
I won't throw you for a loop yet. Jane, my initial question is just always, how is it that you came to be working in the mental health field?
Yeah. So that's right. I am in, I work on the Gadigal lands of the Eora people in Sydney, Australia, where it is currently quite cold. You're in like a cut off top, and I'm sitting here and can't feel my fingers. Yeah, and that's always a long story, isn't it? But I guess the short version is I had been working in the international aid and development, or I guess humanitarian space, and was exhausted. And I was burnt out, and I'd been through a solid decade of, I guess, deconstructing my faith and working in a space that was high poverty settings, post-conflict, post-disaster, lots of trauma, with no skills in how to manage the impact on me or my team, or no idea really how to navigate that. And so I'm grieving this kind of loss of my whole worldview, my ideology, having come from a previous decade of being involved in church ministry. So high school, Bible college, church planting, church ministry, the whole thing. Found my way into the humanitarian sector, as a good white savior does, coming from church ministry. and got there and just went, whoa. And so everything kind of fell apart, sort of gradually, but also all at once.
Yeah.
And I just got to the point where I was working with people in community, like amazing Indigenous communities in different parts of the world, watching them navigate intense suffering, and come together at the community level after a natural disaster or, after a conflict, and was just so fascinated at the way that they sang together and wept and wailed together and supported each other, and just found myself like aching for that and kind of missing that whole sort of church community, church connection thing, but knowing I couldn't be part of that anymore. But then also going, whoa, this is all really big and heavy. How do I navigate it? So I just found myself really fascinated with the nervous system, with how how the body processes and alchemizes trauma, how we do that together, how we do that best together in relationship, and started to just look into all of that, and then just thought, I need a slower pace. I need to actually do something different. So then started to retrain as a counsellor, and then became registered, and have been in private practice, for a few years now, post all of that. So that's a very long answer to your introductory question, but I kind of don't know how else to answer it.
Yeah, no, and this is good because we'll dive into sort of each section of that, I think. The question I almost started with is, one of the things I've heard working with religious trauma here in the States is that Australia is a much different religious environment. And so I want to get sort of your take on not just your experience personally, but also now having a trauma background and working specifically with religious trauma, what you sort of see about that, in Australia and with the clients you're working with, compared to maybe what other religious trauma folks talk about, or how we present our religious backgrounds.
Yeah, we like to say here that it's not as, I guess, religion and faith is not as baked into the culture as it perhaps is for you in North America. And it's definitely here, and we have pockets of Christian nationalism. We definitely have very strong, and we do tend to absorb on a pop culture level as well as a kind of religious wave level, a lot of stuff that happens in North America. So we do. I definitely grew up. Well, I grew up at Hillsong, and so like I was there when there was 50 people in a church hall putting out chairs, and it
Yeah.
was daggy and it was conservative and it was kind of like, it wasn't cool until it was, so it kind of following what was going on in the US. And
Yeah.
we might use the word Pentecostal where you would use evangelical, but I think that whole movement really hit us hard in the 80s and 90s. So there was a big kind of Pentecostal evangelical movement. There is lots of different. We're very close to New Zealand. We're very similar culturally to New Zealand, and they actually have the highest rate of cults per capita of anywhere in the world, which is fascinating. And we have many of those same groups here. We are still, I think, referred to as a Christian nation. So it's very much part of our history of being colonized.
Yeah.
But we're a bit more kind of cynical. We're not as I don't know. There's a bit more sort of won't be taken for a full sort of way of being, I think.
Sure.
And I think we question things a little differently. But having said that, the experience of harm in faith spaces in Australia and New Zealand is significant. And most of the people that I see in practice have experienced some kind of religious or spiritual trauma and harm in faith spaces. So it is definitely different, but it is just as significant in terms of the impact.
Yeah, for sure. Would you say, and obviously this is your opinion, not factual for the entire continent, but would you say religions share a privileged status in Australia and New Zealand, or is it sort
Absolutely.
of? Yeah.
So,
and
I mean, even really practically with tax breaks and that sort of thing, but yeah, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. So though that North American model of like, not everybody is religious, but religion sort of gets that default status as being a good thing.
Yeah. Government funding for religious schools and all that kind of stuff, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hillsong, before it became the Hillsong we know now, which I don't know my Australian timeline well, would have followed the Jesus Freak movement in the 80s here in North America.
Yeah, I think it was all kind of, so I joined in 1984, and it was a small church, and that was all kind of happening around the same time. And yeah, there was definitely that kind of Jesus freak, Jesus people, that whole movement was definitely around. But yeah, I was 13. But yeah, it was kind of off the back of a lot of that, and the charismatic movement that was, waking up.
Yeah. And for those of you who are not familiar with Hillsong, sort of my reference there is it's I would say one of the most well-known mega churches, big groups in Canada, big group in LA. I think Justin Bieber and maybe Chris Pratt are both the famous attendees at various points in their lives.
Yeah.
And also like riddled with scandal throughout its history, as mega churches will be.
Yeah.
So a phrase you threw out that I want to go back to, sort of circled in my head right away, was as the white savior complex. Growing up in church, and that evangelical idea of like, we need to save people. It is our responsibility to save people. So were you still in the church in that move to the humanitarian sector, or was the deconstruction sort of overlapping there?
It was definitely overlapping, but I was still considering whether I could still be part of a church. So I think I shifted out of being able to be part of, I guess, the church as an institution, and I was questioning all kinds of things. I'd stopped believing in hell, but I kind of was too scared to say it out loud, and like all that, the classic kind of story trajectory. I'd been sort of secretly downloading MP3 files of Rob Bell's sermons and, like the contraband of Brian McLaren's books and all that kind of stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
And so, that was all happening. And when I started working in the humanitarian sector, I still wanted that sense of community, but I didn't know where to find it. And, like we tend to do when we come out of high control spaces, we take so much of what we knew or how we were in those spaces into other parts of our lives. And so I think I definitely went into the humanitarian sector going, I'm here, guys, like, I'm ready, like that sense of calling and mission and all of that. And that, that was a steep learning curve, I would say. But what a privilege. Yeah.
And I think it's a podcast, so people couldn't see me laughing at the contraband of Rob Bell sermons. But not just at sort of, yes, that's a thing that people who are deconstructing all had to do. The trajectory of understanding some of the harmful systems at play in religion, that savior complex, proselytizing, evangelizing folks, but also like pulling that thread of what's your identity under that, and knowing that like wanting to be helpful wasn't something you got from the church. That's probably something innate to you and your identity. And I think that I love talking to other professionals because it's one of those things is like, right, we went through that too. Like there's no book to read. There's nothing to avoid that, to untangle how complex and layered some of this stuff is.
Yeah, that's right. And my therapist says to me, how lovely that you've had all these opportunities in church ministry and the humanitarian space, and now as a therapist to avoid your own needs. I'm like, damn you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All these great ways to defer to other people at the risk of, having to ask for what I might need myself.
Yeah. Did you have a role in the church growing up? Were you in the ministry at all? Just the question I want to ask is sort of like your understanding of boundaries. Was that taught from the church? And is that why that burnout happened then?
Yeah. I mean, boundaries and church ministry are not really two things you kind of go together that well, are they? They're very porous. Yeah, for sure. So I was a teenage youth leader. I was at all the things. I was part of the creative ministries team. I was all of that stuff. Straight to Bible college for 2 years, straight into a church planting role. And so, I was in ministry. I was the youth pastor. I was the worship leader. I was the whole thing. And then later on served in a I guess the charity arm of a church for a couple of years in the community space, which was a little bit different, but still there, still having to be on the platform and doing all the stuff and preaching and all of it. And boundaries are not really a thing in those spaces. Well, you just kind of whatever, anything it takes, all for the cause. Yeah.
And that even all the roles you listed, right? That's not one person's job.
No, that's right. But it was crazy. And then taking that into the humanitarian space was just wild, because there's these enormous needs in front of you and your needs could never be as big as those. And so you just extend until there's nothing left. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And there's again, I mean, some of this stuff is lived experience. Some of this stuff is this feedback loop where we're rewarded for not having boundaries. We're rewarded for being people pleasers, not saying no to things. And then some of it is like, right, we find ourselves wanting to be helpful in spaces where there is a lot of need. And some of that is super valid and reasonable, and some of that is like, oh no, that's never going to end well, that's unhealthy from the start.
And I think that will be the work of my life now, at 53, just kind of going, I have to be super conscious of that in everything I'm doing. Where do I begin and end in this conversation, in this work, in this whatever it is I'm doing in this relationship. I have to be super conscious of that, because I get depleted really easily.
Because you're human. and that's
Yeah, that's right.
how we work,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, what was I don't I know some of the big names from Australia in narrative therapy. I'm a postmodern therapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So
Hmm.
the Michael Whites of the world were very
Mm.
influential in my young career. But
Mm.
I'm curious, sort of, what's the idea of opening your own practice, going into business for yourself, private practice? What is that like in a setting like yours in Australia, in Sydney?
Yeah, I actually really love it. I do a couple of days a week in person in a great suburb with that feels really aligned with my values, and I love the people there. And then a couple of days from home, online sessions, and so it's a really nice balance. Um, as I say, I work mainly with people who've experienced harm in faith settings. And last year, with two other therapists, Sam Sellers and Elise Hurd, we started the Religious Trauma Collective for Australia and New Zealand. And so we had an online event a couple of months ago, which was incredible. Blew us away with the kind of with the interest and people's experience of it. So that's been really exciting to sort of just, I guess, work in the private practice space, hear people's stories within our
Yeah.
setting and go, I knew it. I knew I wasn't making this up. I knew this was a big thing in our part of the world. But the reason we started the collective as well is because like I found it really, really difficult to find a therapist who had any idea what I was talking about in terms of faith
Yep.
deconstruction. And and so did so have so many others. And so I started looking for them. I'm like, oh, cool. Now that I'm working in this space, I'll just find all the other people that are working in this space. Crickets. Like
Yeah.
there was, so I found one, I found Sam, and then we kind of put our feelers out, and maybe there was a handful of people that we found, and now we've certainly expanded that out. But there's no training, as you know, like there's no, even from your part of the world, there's no kind of specific training. There's no
Nope.
specific diagnosis, really. There's no understanding or language in sort of therapy worlds around religious trauma. So it's just been it's been really rewarding, actually, to kind of just see it open up and see conversations starting to happen now, and seeing people go, oh, here's some podcasts with voices from my part of the world. Here's a resource written by someone that I know. Like, it's because it does feel a bit different to the
Yeah.
experience, from North America or even the UK. And so it's a really interesting, evolving space here. And we're really advocating to see religious trauma being brought into trauma trainings and to be spoken about at we don't get licensed here. We're registered, I guess, with different peak bodies depending on so I'm registered with the peak body for counsellors in Australia, and so within those peak bodies where we want to do more presentations, show up at their events, and sort of be a bit more visible,
Yeah.
to expand understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. Is Sydney? Yeah. I don't want to talk politics. In the U.S., cities are almost always very liberal leaning, where the
Mm.
rural areas are much more conservative. I'm curious, sort of, if that holds true for Sydney.
Yeah, very similar. I mean, last weekend we had numbers varying between 100,000 and 300,000 people march across the Harbour Bridge,
Yeah.
supporting Palestine. So
Mhm.
we definitely are more open
Yeah.
in the cities, and I think particularly Sydney and Melbourne, probably the most. But yeah, and then yeah, in more rural areas it is a bit more conservative, understandably. Like so much of
Yeah.
our politics and so much of the way we see the world is driven by need and by kind of fear or insecurity or change, or so
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
privilege, I guess, as well.
Well, and you talked about it sort of being crickets when you were looking for people who knew, and
Mm.
so I think the point I was sort of building to is this idea that, like, I'm in a city, I'm in an urban setting, and even with
Mm.
that more liberal leaning, it's still, there's one person in my state other than me who does religious trauma.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
And I'm
Yeah.
an hour and a half away from Chicago, and even in Illinois, it's still pretty limited. So
Yeah.
culturally and geographically, it can be really hard to find someone. I
Yeah.
mean, you brought up Rob Bell, but like I'll bring up Marlene Winnell, who she coined the term religious trauma syndrome. We've since dropped the syndrome, but like her book came out in the mid 90s, and here it is 2025, and we're still trying to get the word out that this is a thing, and this is a thing that affects a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's very, very, our understanding is very, very new. And certainly the academic literature, you know, like for our part of the world, I mean, anywhere really, but for our part of the world particularly, there are definitely new and emerging scholarly articles and research being done, which is really exciting. But I think there's such a long way to go for it to become more broadly understood. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lag between the psychological community and what research is being done. And I think the number of memoirs and social media influencers who are out there, which is not a bad thing. It's just it's sort of a quirk of psychology that doing good research takes time.
Yeah, that's right.
Are people receptive? Obviously, you've connected with people who want help and want to work and get the support, but are people in general receptive to this idea, or is it still sort of a taboo thing in the culture writ large?
Oh, yeah, I think it is. I think, well, it kind of depends on who you're talking to, but even in therapy land, I have just a little introductory course that I was promoting amongst, it's called What I Wish My Therapist Knew About Religious Trauma. So it's kind of, I was speaking to a group of counselors, just an online thing. And the pushback was fascinating. Like just kind of going, oh yeah, this is really biased, and this is just your experience, and you know, like that. There's such resistance to sort of going. Actually, more than one thing can be true at the same time. You know, being part of a faith community can be an incredible support and a resource for people, of course. And there can also be, you know, significant harm that's experienced that can result in trauma. But even being able to hold more than one thing being true at the same time can be really tricky, because we're, you know, increasingly polarized with our, you know, the ways that we see the world. So yeah, it is interesting. It depends on who you're talking to, but I think there's great relief amongst people who have experienced it and who sit across from me just going, oh man, it's just so nice to talk to someone who I don't have to, you know, describe, you know, YWAM or whatever, you know, like sort of naming things they were part of, and Crusaders for Christ at university or whatever, you know. So yeah.
Yes, there's a shared language. I was, as a therapist, like when someone grew up in the same tiny culty sect that I grew up, I'm like excited, like, hey, I'm glad you left too, how nice. And then that
what was that sect?
It is the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. It really is nowhere other than Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan. It's quite small, very local to the city I'm in. And my parents are both teachers, so I grew up deeply in everybody I knew was a part of this group. Even though I'm in an urban setting, even though I'm around a lot of other types of people, the people I interacted with were all, I call it a cult. We're all part of the cult. And so, it's interesting. And then finding people who grew up that way, or, you know, are from one of those other states, and connecting it shares that shared experience, but like shared language saves a lot of time too, to understand. Not only was I supposed to give this percentage of my income, but I was also scared I was going to hell if I didn't.
Yeah, right.
And like not having to explain that, especially if it's really triggering, or, you know, that's what you're coming in to work on. I think it's just really helpful to have some of that shared language, and not just the language, but also the lived experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And like the internet is lovely. Lots of good, lots of bad on it. But, you know, the deconstruction groups, the podcasts, all those things are really great and wonderful. But again, like to be able to sit across from someone in real time and process that, I think is a different experience.
Yeah. It's like, how does that apply to me? Help me unpack that for my situation. Like it's just such a relief often for people. Yeah. It was for me when I finally found someone who understood. But it's good.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about cults because you
Sure.
brought up New Zealand. Um, it's so interesting how the dynamics don't change given the size of a group. And so I
Mm,
think when people talk about cults, they think about growing up on a compound, everybody's wearing the same colored robe, blah 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 blah.
hmm.
But that those dynamics of control are the same at a Hillsong, at a mega
Hmm.
church. We see those same things, and so even without this growing up in the same group, that experience is very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. We've just had quite an exciting opportunity to write a submission for. So the Victorian government has just opened an inquiry into the impact, no, so the recruitment tactics and the impacts of cults and fringe groups in the state of Victoria. Um, and and because we work, I'm in New South Wales, but we work with national groups, people who have experienced the same thing. They're franchises, aren't they, really? So it was really good to be able to, on behalf of the collective, to be able to write a submission and just say, as therapists, this is what we see.
Yeah,
But one of the things that the inquiry stipulated in their terms of reference was that this isn't about beliefs. Like, we're not going after religious beliefs, we're going after coercive behavior. And
hmm,
so we want to understand what that looks like. And so, yeah, there's been so many incredible submissions and so many people, like hundreds of people, who have contributed either as individuals or on behalf of organizations or groups. And so it's going to be fascinating over the next 12 months to see what comes from that.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's the coercive behavior, it's the control, it's the, belonging being contingent on certain behaviors, because the
yeah,
belief itself is sort of toothless if all of that stuff doesn't surround it. Mm,
yeah. And that the size of the group doesn't
no,
sort of insulate people from that
no,
harm.
that's right. Yeah, exactly.
I often say religion isn't the problem. The organized
Yeah,
religion is the
yeah,
issue.
that's it.
Um, why so many cults in New Zealand? I guess
Yeah,
that's the question.
you're
That's the question
fascinated
I
now,
want
aren't
to
you?
ask.
Yeah, I don't know. Our great friends, the collective is a great friend of an organisation called Decult New Zealand, and they did their first in-person event last year. That was, I think, in part funded by the New Zealand government, because they have had some really significant harm that has come from a couple of specific cults there. I don't know, maybe because it's just beautiful and you can kind of hide away in gorgeous little, communities in the hills, and nobody knows what you're doing. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
fascinating. Um,
yeah, that
yeah,
is
it's a lot of
fascinating.
work happening. Mm.
Yeah, I know one of my like topics of interest, unfortunately, is the far right sort of neo-Nazi groups and the overlap with Christian nationalism. And
Mm.
I say, unfortunately, it's not an interest of mine. It has become one because of our political landscape.
Oh,
I just wanted to do religious trauma. I didn't want to do politics, but here we are. Um,
yeah,
and a lot of those groups are in locations where they can be isolated, where they have can exert a lot of control over folks
hmm,
without a lot of oversight. And
yeah,
so, it's not so much a compound, but if you're in a town of 800 people and 600 of those people are part of the group, that's a
that's
great
right.
deal of control you're exerting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It's scary, but again, we love and hate the internet, but one of the good things is exposure and awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mm.
I've had Chris Shelton comes to mind, who left Scientology, and like
Mhm.
they limited their internet access for a long time. Like that was
Yeah,
one of the just easy sort of simple solutions to keeping people
yeah.
really limited. Um, I love the collective that you've built and connecting to other people. Um, is that something that you guys meet regularly? Is that you do consultations together? Is that more of the messaging and doing trainings and trying to get the word out? Or is it both?
It's kind of all of the above in a way. It's the three of us just kind of thought, we actually started with a Facebook, like a private Facebook group for therapists in Australia and New Zealand, to just kind of go,
Mhm.
hey, anyone else working in this space? And you know, we've got, I think, 180 or something now. Like over the last year or two, people have just, they're either working in the space and don't have any idea, you know, when people start talking about the fruit of the spirit, or you know, something, they're like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
But most of them now have, like, we, the little polls and things that we do sometimes, most of them have lived experience, and are going, how do I navigate my own lived experience with religious trauma or harm in these spaces, with, you know, the triggers of being, you know, having, working in this area with people in front of me, how do I, like, it's all of those sorts of questions. And so we wanted to start this group to just create a bit of a network. We meet monthly just online, just to sort of, you know, casually talk some of the stuff through. And then we thought, actually, let's try to kind of make it a more public thing. And so at the moment it is, we call it just, I guess, a landing place, a soft place to land for people who are at any point of the journey of, maybe hell isn't real, to I want to burn the whole fucking thing down. So it's kind of like that sort of, you know,
Yeah.
that continuum. Anyone at any point of that continuum, we want them to be able to kind of come across the website and go, oh look, there's a Substack article, there's a podcast, there's a book. Oh look, there's heaps of resources from Australians and New Zealanders. Oh look, there's like all these ways I can get in touch. Oh hey, there's like 25 therapists that I can contact.
Yeah.
So at the moment we're kind of just, we just wanted it to be a place for people to go, I can get support, whatever that looks like, and make as much of it, like blogs and articles and things, and make as much as we possibly can free. And then the event will probably be an annual thing. We're planning for next year now, which is very exciting,
Yeah.
and kind of like mind blowing at the same time. But just trying to gather all the voices in our part of the world who are doing really good work in this
Mhm.
space. And as you say, people have written memoirs and you know, panels for therapists. We had a call panel from our friends in New Zealand who talked about, you know, how you work with GPs around this area, in this area, and all that stuff. So yeah, so we're wanting to raise awareness in our part of the world. We're wanting therapists to feel like they have actual tools to be able to work with clients in this
Yeah.
space. We would love to hold some trainings. Like, we're trying to figure out what that could look like. We're
Mhm.
also all, like, the three of us are, we have day jobs. So we're like, how do we kind of, again, not, and we've actually made a pact, all three of us having been burnt out in church ministry, or, you know, one way or the other.
Yeah.
We kind of just went, let's just check in with each other really regularly, and absolute permission. If you're exhausted, you're tired, this is overwhelming, this is too much at any point, we just stop. So
Yeah.
it's like permission to just leave, permission to not do that thing today, you know.
Right.
And so far that's working really well. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that idea of, you know, moving away from the white savior complex, moving away from the idea that, like, this is new and exciting for me, so I need to reinvent the wheel, and
Yeah.
connecting with people who have already done the work, or who are simultaneously doing the work but can lighten the load.
Yeah.
I think that's really healing, because a lot of us who spent time in the church are programmed to just, like, ooh, I can fix that. I can do
That's
that.
right.
I'm excited. I am
Yeah.
moved in some way. So let me do all of it.
Mm. Yeah, and it's really important to us that we facilitate a, I guess, a gathering of people, whatever that looks like, whether that's one-on-one or in smaller groups. We, you know, we want to host in the different cities that we're all from. We want to be able to have. We've done a couple of, like, in-person pop-ups, sort of just casual dinner, meet at a pub, whatever. So we'd love to be able to just create some spaces like that. But we never want to sort of position ourselves as, oh, hi, here we are, the oracles come to sort of, you know, let you know how things go in this, you know, part of town.
Yeah.
And I think that we're really conscious that again, taking some of those high control you know, systems and the way we operate within those, it just gives us chills to sort of think of taking that into this as well. So we're really conscious to you know, always be, you know, we're facilitating people coming together and finding support. We're not setting ourselves up as the spokespeople for religious trauma in
Yeah.
Australia and New Zealand. Yeah.
Right. We don't want to leave the church just to create our own.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, uh, I don't want to be too dramatic. My last guest, we were talking about some of the current drama, and
Yeah.
I don't want to diminish it. Some of the harm that has come to light in the deconstruction spaces.
Yes.
Um, and it's this weird thing where I think when you've lived it, but also, I went to therapy after I left the church, and have done a lot of work, not just in being educated and being able to help people,
Mm.
but doing my own work. Um, when you see the dynamics, it's really weird to see like some of these deconstruction influencers sort of pop
Mm.
up. You're like, oh, you're not a pastor anymore, but you're sort of leading your
Yeah.
flock still. And that's kind of
Yeah.
yucky. Like, I don't
Yeah.
like that.
Coming to
Um,
us with your great wisdom and your, all of
yeah.
that
So
stuff. Yeah.
it is a thing I think that like people really have to actively be aware of, because again,
Yeah.
a lot of times I think they leave the doctrine behind, but don't leave the organizing principles of the church behind.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it doesn't do us any favors either as individuals, because it's too much pressure. I don't think anyone is really built for that kind of pressure of having to come with all the answers and, all of that. And I think it actually does us good to kind of just sit back and go, like, we don't know everything, but here's what we know. Here's how we can support. Here's someone else who can support you. Like, here's a great resource,
Yeah.
Um, and I think also, like, the deconstruction space, as you say, it has the potential for harm, and I think I'm actually really keen to get out of it. Like, I'm at the point where I'm like, how do we, how do we rebuild? I've worked so
Yeah.
much with people on the rebuilding of identity. What could it mean to be spiritual now that I'm out of all of this? What could it mean to be spiritual without actually using that word spiritual? How do I reclaim some joy and some ease and some play and fun in my life? um yeah, so I think we're often looking for community so desperately, that we latch on and then kind of go, oh. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, you know what I mean, like, and even what does it mean to rebuild community? Like, how do we even do that? And was the community that we were part of even healthy? Do we even want it to look like that? So I
Yeah.
don't want to be at something 6 times a week. I don't want to be, like,
Right.
it's like, what?
Yeah.
So what does all that look like now?
Yeah.
So yeah, all of these open-ended, unanswered questions that we're working in therapy every day with people,
Yeah.
and certainly in our online presence or anything in an organized way. I don't want to recreate that dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think it's privilege and supremacy and like a colonizing mindset that some people just don't do the work on that stuff to leave it
Yeah.
behind,
Yeah.
and it repeats
Absolutely.
itself. Those things are not church creations; those are human creations. Groups, non-religious groups, have those issues as well.
100%. Yeah.
And so I think it is active, ongoing work to not recreate that. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned, but I want to circle back and highlight and put a lot of arrows and flashing lights around all the resources that you put out. I'm curious, having a book available. Um, I'm curious what your teaching and your education about therapy were on self-disclosure, because I think that's a big balancing act. A lot of those of us who are in the deconstruction religious trauma spaces are like, our disclosure is helpful to people,
Mm.
but in my training, my background, self-disclosure, like self of therapist is a big no-no. And so it's weird not only doing the religious trauma work, but also some of that like, oh no, I'm not an expert just because I have my certificate or my licensure on the wall. Like, I'm a person too. Here's my
Mm.
experience. I think that's very
Mm.
helpful, but I think a lot of therapists struggle with how to find the balance with that. So I'm curious what writing the book and putting out some of those very personal aspects of it was like for you.
Mm. Oh yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think, I mean, same with, my training here, like, it's very much, self-disclosure is not, usually not appropriate. Sometimes it can be very much client-led, but it's not, certainly not what we lead with. And so I think for me, again, back to the conversation on boundaries, like it's very, and complex trauma survivor, like, just, hey, anyone want to know anything about my my childhood, my developmental trauma, here, let's talk about it. So having to kind of be conscious of that, but also wanting to be able to I guess give expression to my experience in a way that other people could see themselves reflected in, and do that in like my ebook, or my Substack, or social media, whatever, like being a bit more open in those public facing ways, so that, or podcasts and things that are on my website, so if people do want to go and sort of listen to how I talk or interact, or they want to read my story, that helps them kind of decide whether or not I might be a good fit for them in therapy. So it's more sort of, here's all this stuff that you can access in the public space, and that's where I will be a bit more open and just be a human being. But in the therapy room, this is very much about you. And I will sometimes say to people, is there anything, as we're getting to know each other, is there anything that you would find helpful to ask me, to be able to help build trust, or for you to be able to kind of feel a bit more at ease, or and sometimes that can be things like people want to know that you're affirming, or they want to know that just they want to know your political stance on things, or like sometimes that can be that sort of thing. But mostly it's, they just want to know that you get what they're talking about. But otherwise, absolutely, the focus is on the person in front of me.
Yeah, well, and I think too, in being aware of some of those structures of harm, like the therapy in America, our healthcare system's deeply flawed.
Yeah.
In a lot of horrific ways, but like not everybody can afford to see me. And
that's right.
Part of my work has been wanting information, good information, not just for myself, various voices, but like I used to blog more regular than I do now, but I have a YouTube channel, I have the podcast, like I'm trying to put out content regularly, not because I love hearing myself talk, but because not everybody can work with me. And if
that's right. Yeah.
I can merely be a jumping off point, if I can direct you to a connection that you need in part of your healing journey, that's awesome. Like I'm trying to facilitate that for people who are coming from different backgrounds, from different means. If you're leaving a very high control religion, you might not have your own bank account, let alone be able to go to therapy.
Yeah.
And trying to be cognizant of that while not doing what I did while being in the church, which was like never be able to afford things and just be perpetually poor.
Yes.
So trying to not repeat that, but also trying to have good information be accessible for people.
Yeah, it's a balance, but yeah, I agree. And that's why I have my Substack, and and all the resources that we put up on the collective website as well. There's lots people can access.
Yeah, and I love that. And those are, I'm not saying young therapists need to do those things. Don't feel obligated. Therapists who are tuning in and younger in their career to like put out free stuff. But I do think it's something I look for in some of those deconstruction spaces. Like, are they just rebuilding a church, or are they sharing this information? Is this about supporting people in their own autonomy, or is this about the group? And that's just, I think, an important marker for people to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure.
So when I had seen some of the collective's work, but when you reached out and then I was on your website, I was just thrilled to see all the resources, the Substack. I don't think therapists need to do that, but in our specific line of expertise with religious trauma, I think it's really helpful and important to see. We're not just doing the hierarchy in a different organization. We have left all of that behind.
That's it. And the gatekeeping nature of it, like you don't want to give people the ick.
Right.
And feel like they're being controlled in another way. And the opposite of that is building trust. Yeah. Yeah,
for sure. And like, I mean, patriarchy, like I'm a male therapist, so I'm always aware of like not being that pastor role or not propagating that. I have long hair and look a bit like what white Jesus might have looked like. So I'm always aware of like, right. I'm not trying to trigger anybody, but also I want people to have good information. I don't want Jordan Peterson to be the only person on the internet that people can listen to about psychology. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with some of those pluggables in mind and all those resources, if people want to connect with you, if people want to find more about your work, if they want to, I have a lot of therapists who listen to the podcast. If they want to look into the training that you offer, where do they go? How do they find you? If they're in New Zealand or Australia, how do they connect to the collective?
Yeah, so the collective is just called the Religious Trauma Collective, Australia, New Zealand, and just a quick search will bring that up because literally nothing else exists like it in our part of the world. And yeah, and I'm just Jane Kennedy Counselling. So yeah, easy to find me. My website, yeah, as I say, Substack, Instagram, all the places.
We'll have all those links in the show notes so people can drop down and find those right away. I love to a lot of my guests do this, but I just kudos to you for a stylistic choice. But I love when people put their podcasts on their website because, like, yeah, it's nice to go to one place when you hear somebody on one podcast, be like, oh, what else have they talked about, or who else have they spoken with?
Yeah,
so,
and it's good to just give people a sense of who you are, and and who else is talking about this, and
yeah, it's a lovely way, I think, to build that community and not have it be focused on just one personality. So
yeah,
love that. We will have all those links in the show notes so people can find it pretty easily. Jane, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
That's great. Thanks, Jeremy.
And to all our wonderful listeners, thanks for tuning in again. We will be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.